The video record. Today is Wednesday, the 17th day of February 2010. The time is 11:16 a.m. We're here at U.S. Legal Support, 444 West Railroad Avenue, West Palm Beach, Florida. This is the videotape deposition of Jeffrey Epstein, taken by the plaintiffs in case number 502008CA028051 the matter of LN versus Jeffrey Epstein, filed in the 15th Judicial Circuit in Fort Palm Beach County, Florida. Court reporter is Terry Becker of U.S. Legal Support. The videographer Joe Rogan of U.S. Legal Support. Would all counsel please take their turns for the record?
Brad Edwards on behalf.
Mr. Jaffe.
Not Mike, but Stephen Jaffe.
Michael Pike on behalf of Jeffrey Epstein.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Can you give us your name?
Jeffrey Epstein.
Mr. Epstein, you made a comment when you came in the room that you were appreciative of me being respectful to your housekeeper yesterday, and I intend for that to be the same with you today. I want to start by asking you, at this point, we've gone through a lot of discovery in this case. There aren't many disputed facts as to what actually happened at your house. And generally, I think you would agree that you devised a way for young females to come to your house and engage in varying degrees of sexual activity. Some of the girls as young as 12, some of them as old as 17 or so, most in between. But as of yet, you haven't provided an explanation. So I want to provide you an opportunity to tell the jury at this time why you did it.
I'm going to object to confusing, compound, and irrelevant as worded.
I'd like to answer that question, frankly. However, at this time, my attorneys have told me that I can't, and I must invoke my 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment rights, or I risk losing their counsel. Accordingly, I therefore assert those rights. Sorry.
And in addition to that, I'm going to move to strike counsel's statement as narrative as well.
I understand. I wanted to provide him the opportunity if today was going to be the day.
Same thing, move to strike narrative.
Mr. Epstein, how long have you been sexually attracted to underage minor females?
Objection, harassing, argumentative.
Are you kidding?
No, I mean, I don't feel like I'm divulging any secrets here, right?
Move to strike.
Oh, that's the question.
I'd like to answer that question as well, like all your other questions today. However, I have to follow my attorney's advice. They have told me that I must invoke my 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment right to not answer those questions today or any questions relevant to this lawsuit. So accordingly, I'm going to assert those rights and under the Constitution is guaranteed by the 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment.
Okay. Would you consider yourself addicted to sex with minor females?
Same objections.
Mr. Edwards, I want to be very respectful. And as the current U.S. Attorney has described your law firm as a criminal enterprise and part of one of the largest frauds in Florida's history, it's been reported that your firm has fabricated multiple cases against me in order to fleece unsuspecting investors out of millions and millions of dollars. So unfortunately at this time, though I'd like to answer that question, on advice of counsel I'm going to have to refrain and assert my 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment right.
Can you then provide an explanation for what relevance that soliloquy of yours has to whether or not you engaged in sex acts with she was a minor?
Objection. No, he cannot. Argumentative, compound, harassing.
Mr. Pike, with all due respect, it wasn't my idea for him to give this speech about a former RRA law firm. I'm just asking him, elaborate on that.
Counsel, I'm working with your follow-up question, so I'm objecting, and I'm objecting to form and stating the reasons on the record as to why the form is required to be objected to based upon your question.
Will he elaborate on the relevance of that soliloquy to touching when she was 13, 14, and 15 years old in a sexual manner?
I'm going to object again, argumentative, compound, harassing, and irrelevant as worded.
You can answer.
I'd like to answer. However, I'm going to have to assert my Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, and 14th Amendment right, as advised by my counsel. Otherwise, I risk losing their advice.
Mr. Epstein, have you ever been diagnosed with a sex addiction to minors by a psychologist or other medical professional?
I intend to respond to all your questions at some relevant time. However, today, at the present time, my attorneys have counseled me that I cannot provide answers to any questions relevant to this lawsuit, and I must accept their advice or risk losing my Sixth Amendment right to effective representation. Accordingly, I assert my Fifth, Sixth, and 14th Amendment rights to the United States Constitution.
In addition to that, Mr. Edwards, as the court has ruled in several matters, Mr. Epstein's medical history is not relevant at this time, nor has he placed same at issue in this case.
From sexual interaction with hundreds of underage minor females in the last 10 years of your life. Is that true?
Objection, relevance.
Mr. Edwards, the current U.S. Attorney has described your law firm as a criminal enterprise and part of the largest fraud in Florida's history. It has been reported that your firm fabricated multiple cases, many multiple cases against me in order to fleece unsuspecting investors out of millions and millions of dollars. Unfortunately, at this time, in response to your question, my attorneys advised me that I must assert my Sixth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, and 14th Amendment right. Though I believe you know that I would really like to answer your questions today, but at this moment I must assert those rights and risk having my attorneys resign.
Jury, that you didn't commit the crimes that have been alleged against you by the various females that were underage when you engaged in sex with them? Are you telling the jury that right now?
Objection, argumentative, harassing.
I would like to respond to that question, as you know. However, at the present time, my attorneys have counseled me that I cannot provide answers to any questions relevant to this lawsuit, and I must accept their advice or risk losing my Sixth Amendment right to effective representation. Accordingly, I assert my Fifth, Sixth, and 14th Amendment right under the United States Constitution.
Mr. Epstein, you understand that this is the video that will be played to the jury in trial against you, and wants answers. These juries are going to, the jury is going to want answers. So I know that you're telling us that you're going to respond at some time in the future, but the time is now. Would you like this opportunity to explain why you engaged in sexual activity with beginning when she was 13 years old and you were 50 years old?
I'm going to object once again. We're getting way too argumentative with the questioning. The questioning is compound, it's speculative, and it's also harassing. Whether or not this deposition video thereof is played in front of a jury is a question of fact, and it will be determined by a judge pursuant to a motion and limiting various portions thereof may or may not be played. So, having placed those objections on the record, I'm going to instruct Mr. Epstein not to answer that question.
Mr. Pike, I don't know if you watched the 13 hours of harassing questions to Ms. that she sometimes invoked her Fifth Amendment rights, and I understand the adverse inference that will be given. And she was made to answer these questions, and these exact same questions were asked of her. In fact, I'm using the phraseology from Mr. Ludier. I'm not trying to harass him. I'm simply asking him to explain to the jury, if you're saying that it didn't happen, say it didn't happen. If you're saying it did happen, explain to the jury why you did it. That's all we want to hear. I'm being respectful about this.
In an effort to keep a clean record and be respectful to the co-reporter, and rather than have a diatribe back and forth between you and myself, I'm going to move to strike your last statement as irrelevant. Let's move on.
Mr. Epstein, is it true you were born January 20th, 1953?
Yes.
Where?
New York.
Where in New York?
Brooklyn.
Did you go to high school there?
Yes, sir.
Where?
Lafayette High School.
After high school, did you attend college?
Yes, sir.
And where was that?
In New York.
What college did you attend?
Cooper Union.
I'm sorry.
Cooper Union.
And did you get a degree from Cooper Union?
No, sir.
How many years were you in college?
I believe 2.
What did you study?
Physics.
And why did you leave?
I intend to respond to all relevant questions regarding this lawsuit. However, at the present time, my attorneys have counseled me that I cannot provide answers to questions that may be relevant to this lawsuit. So accordingly, I assert my constitutional rights as guaranteed by the 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment.
By you invoking your Fifth Amendment rights as to why you left college, is it safe then to presume that that answer you believe would incriminate you in some way?
Okay, I'm going to move to strike speculative, argumentative, harassing, calls for a legal conclusion, and I know exactly what you're trying to do here, Mr. Edwards, is lace the record with questions that would ultimately give you an adverse inference at any potential trial of this matter. So having put that on the record, I'm going to instruct him not to answer that question based upon his 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment rights to the United States Constitution.
With all due respect, you cannot invoke his Fifth Amendment rights. Your attorneys instructed me in that fashion.
He can.
And Tatum Miller had to do it herself. So I'd like to hear it from Mr. Epstein. Can we assume that by you invoking your Fifth Amendment rights as to why you left college early, that that answer you feel would incriminate you?
Once again, move to strike for the same reasons. You can.
I've already answered the question, but I'll restate the answer if need be, which is I intend to respond, and I'd like to respond to all your questions today. However, my counsel has advised me that I must take the 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment right as under the U.S. Constitution.
Okay. After college, where were you employed?
You know, I'd like to respond to all your questions today. However, on advice of counsel, I intend to take the 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment right as provided by the United States Constitution or risk losing my counsel's representation.
Well, isn't it true that you were a teacher at the Dalton School in New York after college?
Again, I would like to respond to all your questions. However, my attorneys have counseled me that I cannot provide answers to any questions today regarding to this lawsuit. So I must accept their advice to risk losing my 6th Amendment right to effective representation. Accordingly, I assert my constitutional rights as guaranteed by the 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment to the Constitution.
Mr. Epstein, did you have sex with any underage students while teaching at the Dalton School?
Could you repeat that?
Yes. Did you have sex with any underage students while teaching at the Dalton School in New York?
Mr. Edwards, your firm has been described by the U.S. Attorney as one of the largest, as a criminal enterprise, perpetrating one of the largest frauds in Florida's history. It has been reported that your firm fabricated multiple cases against me and others in order to fleece unsuspecting investors out of millions and millions of dollars. Unfortunately, at this time, in response to your question, my attorneys have advised me that I must assert my 6th Amendment, 5th Amendment, and 14th Amendment rights. Though I believe you know I'd really like to answer your questions, but at this moment I must assert those rights or having my attorneys resign.
Mr. Pike, I think you know that he has a couple options here. He can answer questions or he can invoke his Fifth Amendment rights. This non-responsive verbiage regarding the RRA law firm is not one of the options. It's inappropriate in a deposition, and I'd ask that you instruct your client not to obstruct this process any further. I'm not going to terminate the deposition. I want it to finish. But obviously, this is going to be the subject matter of some motion in the courts, and you know that the judges are not going to appreciate this. So I'd like it if we can just move this process along by eliminating that portion of his answer. I understand what he's saying. I get it. But that's not something responsive to any of these questions, and I think that you know it's inappropriate.
I think the deponent is answering the questions. So if you believe that the responses are inappropriate, I feel that you can take it up with the court with the motion that you're speaking of, as you've done several times before.
After leaving the Dalton School, is it true that you began working as a money manager at Bear Stearns?
I intend to respond to all your questions regarding this lawsuit at some relevant time. However, at the present time, my attorneys have counseled me that I cannot provide answers to any questions relevant to this lawsuit. Since the U.S. Attorney has described your law firm as a criminal enterprise, Mr. Edwards, and a part of the largest fraud in Florida's history, I am going to assert my Sixth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, and 14th Amendment right as under the U.S. Constitution.
Isn't it true that while you were working at Bear Stearns, you were already engaging in sex with underage minors?
Again, I believe you know the answers to those questions, but
Yes.
excuse me.
do.
May I finish?
Move to strike. Let the
Sure, if
witness
you're gonna take
let the
15
witness
minutes.
let the witness answer your question.
I would love for him to answer your questions.
Mr. Edwards,
Let's
as you
do
know,
that.
there are serious Fifth, Sixth, and 14th Amendment constitutional rights at issue here, and the witness is attempting to answer your questions to the best of his ability, despite how laced they are with adverse inference presumptions.
I don't want the adverse inference. I want answers. That's it. I
So,
don't want these adverse
having said that,
inferences.
please allow the witness to answer the question.
I will.
Okay. Could you repeat the question?
Isn't it true that while working at Bear Stearns, you were already engaging in sex with underage minor females?
As your firm has been described as by the U.S. Attorney as a criminal enterprise, using some of the cases fabricated against me personally, I would like to answer that question today. However, on advice of counsel, I must assert my Fifth, Sixth, and 14th Amendment rights under the U.S. Constitution, or in fact risk losing their representation.
At some point in time while at Bear Stearns, you met and managed the money for a fellow named Leslie Wexner, correct?
Again, I would like to answer all questions relevant to this lawsuit, but today I must exert my Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, and 14th Amendment right under the U.S. Constitution.
In fact, I read in another deposition of yours that you do not consider yourself to be homosexual, correct? You've answered that question before.
Correct.
Do you consider yourself to be bisexual?
No.
Okay. In any event, you did develop a sexual relationship with Leslie Wexner at some point in time. Is that true?
No.
Okay. Did you have a business relationship with Mr. Wexner?
I intend to respond to all relevant questions. I'd like to answer most of your questions, Mr. Edwards, today. But however, especially since your firm has been described by the United States Attorney in South Florida as a criminal enterprise purported to have pulled off the largest fraud in Florida's history, I would like to answer that. However, my attorneys today have counseled me that I must assert my Fifth, Sixth, and 14th Amendment right under the U.S. Constitution, and therefore I'm going to do that.
Are you saying that because Rothstein Rosenfeld Adler was determined to be a criminal enterprise, or somebody was running a criminal enterprise out of that law firm, that is the reason why you're not going to answer these questions today? You link that together in that answer. I just want to make sure I'm understanding that right.
I'm going to take the Fifth Amendment. I intend to respond to all relevant questions today. I would like to respond. Unfortunately, my attorneys have counseled me I can't. I must assert my Fifth, Sixth, and 14th Amendment rights under the U.S. Constitution.
Because other law firms have asked very similar questions, and you haven't responded to any of theirs either, so I just want to understand what the relationship between Rothstein Rosenfeld Adler is to you invoking your Fifth Amendment rights today? If you can articulate that for me.
Form, compound, argumentative.
Rothstein, Rosenfeld, Adler has been described by the U.S. Attorney as a criminal enterprise, and as part of the largest fraud in Florida's history, it has been reported that your firm fabricated multiple cases using me and against me in order to fleece unsuspecting investors out of millions of dollars.
Another longtime friend of yours is Ghislaine Maxwell, right?
I intend to respond to all relevant questions. I'd like to answer most of the questions today, but I can't because my attorneys have counseled me that I cannot provide answers to any questions relevant to this lawsuit. And I must accept their advice or risk losing my Sixth Amendment right to effective representation. Therefore, I'm going to assert my constitutional rights under the Fifth, Sixth, and 14th Amendment. Excuse me, could we take a break, sir?
Already?
Just restroom.
Yes? Going off the video record at 11:38 a.m.
Thank you.
We're back on the video record at 11:48 a.m.
How did you meet Ghislaine Maxwell?
I intend to respond to all relevant questions to this lawsuit. However, at the present time, my attorneys have counseled me that I cannot provide answers to any questions relevant to this lawsuit and must accept this advice or risk losing my right to effective representation. Accordingly, therefore, I assert my Fifth, Sixth, and 14th Amendment right to the U.S. Constitution.
You would agree, would you not, that Ghislaine Maxwell shares your sexual obsession for underage minor females?
Argumentative, speculation, harassing.
You know, Mr. Edwards, the current U.S. Attorney has described your law firm as a criminal enterprise as taking part in one of the largest frauds in Florida's history. It has been widely reported that your firm fabricated multiple cases of a sexual nature against people, other people, and me in order to fleece unsuspecting investors out of millions of dollars. So unfortunately, at this time, in response to your questions, my attorneys have advised me that I must assert my Sixth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, and 14th Amendment rights. Though I believe, as you know, I'd really like to answer your questions, but at this moment, I must assert those rights or risk losing my attorney or risk losing effective counsel. I intend to respond to all relevant questions regarding this lawsuit. However, at the present time, my attorneys have counseled me that I cannot provide answers to any questions relevant to this lawsuit. Your firm has been described as a criminal enterprise. It's part of the largest fraud in Florida's history, fabricating sexual cases against me and others. Therefore, unfortunately, though I'd like to answer all of your questions today, I'm going to have to assert my Fifth, Sixth, and 14th Amendment right.
Did you and Ghislaine Maxwell sexually assault at Leslie Wexner's house?
I intend to respond to all relevant questions regarding this lawsuit. However, at the present time, my attorneys have counseled me that I cannot provide answers to any questions relevant to this lawsuit and must accept this advice or risk losing my Sixth Amendment right to effective representation. Accordingly, I assert my constitutional rights as guaranteed by the Fifth, Sixth, and 14th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution.
Mr. Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell and you have devised several schemes to lure underage girls to you for sex. Isn't that correct?
Form, argumentative, harassing.
Mr. Edwards, your firm has fabricated multiple cases, sexual harassment claims and other types of sexual cases against me and others in order to be part of what the U.S. Attorney described as the largest fraud in Florida's history. I'd like to answer all your questions. However, my attorneys have counseled me that at least today, I must assert my Fifth, Sixth, and 14th Amendment rights under the U.S. Constitution.
Do you own a home in Manhattan?
I intend to respond to all relevant questions to this lawsuit. However, at the present time, my attorneys have counseled me that I cannot provide answers to any questions relevant to this lawsuit, and I must accept their advice or risk losing my Sixth Amendment right to effective representation. Accordingly, therefore, I have to assert my Fifth, Sixth, and 14th Amendment right under the U.S. Constitution.
Do you own an island in the U.S. Virgin Islands?
I intend to respond to all relevant questions regarding this lawsuit. However, at the present time, my attorneys have counseled me that I cannot provide answers to any questions relevant to this lawsuit, no matter how much I'd like to. Therefore, I must accept their advice or risk losing my Sixth Amendment right to effective representation. Therefore, I have to assert my Fifth, Sixth, and 14th Amendment right under the U.S. Constitution.
Do you own a home in New Mexico?
I intend to respond to all relevant questions regarding this lawsuit, and as I've had to do with most of your questions here today, I'm going to have to take my attorney's advice and assert my Fifth, Sixth, and 14th Amendment right under the U.S. Constitution, or risk losing effective representation.
Is it true that you have had underage females at each of those homes for orgies with you and Ghislaine Maxwell?
Form, argumentative, speculation, and harassing.
Well, I would like to answer that question. I really would. However, as your firm has been described by the U.S. Attorney as a criminal enterprise, whose principal purpose was racketeering conspiracy to generate money for the firm and its co-conspirators through the operation and enterprise and through various activities including mail fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering, and fabricating multiple sex cases against me and others. Though I'd like to answer your question today, Mr. Edwards, my counsel has advised me I must take the Fifth, Sixth, and 14th Amendment right as provided by the U.S. Constitution.
You know somebody named...
Would you spell that for the record?
No.
Or for the court reporter?
No.
You don't know the name?
No. Could you spell it? Okay.
Did your sexual obsession with underage minor females grow at some point in time to allow you access to these underage minors every single day for sex?
Overbroad, speculation, argumentative, compound, harassing, and confusing. Confusing as worded. You want to break it down, Mr. Edwards?
Isn't it true that for the past 10 years you have found a way to engage in sexual conduct with underage minors on an everyday basis?
Speculation, argumentative.
As your firm has been described as a criminal enterprise by the United States Attorney and as part of the scheme to defraud people in South Florida of millions of dollars, you have fabricated sexual cases and sexual claims against people like me and others. Unfortunately, this time, though I'd like to answer your question, Mr. Edwards, my counsel has advised me I cannot. And they have advised me I must assert my Fifth, Sixth, and 14th Amendment rights under the Constitution.
Isn't it true that you have promised underage minors money or other benefit to engage in sexual conduct with you over the past 10 years?
Again, as I've answered many of your questions today, and unfortunately I'm probably going to end up answering most of your questions today, as your firm has been described, the firm bringing this lawsuit, I believe, has been described, and if I'm wrong, please correct me.
You're wrong.
Okay. This is the firm that didn't notice this deposition
Did not.
originally?
No.
Okay. Did not notice?
Right.
I apologize. So your former firm has been described, and the person you represent, Tatum Miller, in this case, was represented by the firm that was described by the U.S. Attorney as perpetrating one of the largest frauds in South Florida's history, fabricating multiple sexual cases against me and others in order to fleece unsuspecting investors out of millions and millions of dollars. So though, unfortunately, I'd like to answer each one of your questions today, my counsel advised me I must assert my Sixth Amendment, 14th Amendment, and Fifth Amendment right. Though I believe you know I'd like to answer those questions, but at this moment I must assert those rights or risk losing my attorneys.
Sure, let's test that answer. Let's talk about Jane Doe 102. Jane Doe 102, who was represented by Bob Josephsberg's firm, Podhurst Orsak, had nothing to do with Rothstein, Rosenfeld, Adler. Do you know?
So she's, again, who? Can you spell it?
Common spelling. Like.
Can you spell it for me, please? How's it, what's the last name? How's it spelled?
I believe.
I intend to respond to all relevant questions regarding this lawsuit. However, at the present time, my attorneys have counseled me that I cannot provide answers to any questions that may be relevant to this lawsuit, and I must accept this advice or risk losing my Sixth Amendment right to effective representation. Accordingly, I assert my constitutional rights as guaranteed by the 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment to the Constitution.
And just for the record, I can only spell it the way that it was spelled in your flight logs from your airplane. I don't know exactly how she spells her name, only how your pilot would spell her name.
Form,
so,
speculation.
If I misspelled it, I'm sorry.
Form, speculation, argumentative, harassing.
That's harassing?
And assumes facts currently not in evidence in this particular deposition, and therefore moved to strike.
I was responding to his question asking me how to spell her name. I don't know how, other than his own pilot.
Mr. Edwards, he asked you to spell the name, you then spelled the name, and then you went on another narrative. There wasn't a question posed on the floor.
You would agree that you interacted with every day in a sexual way when she was 15 years old, right?
Again, I'm sorry?
Sure, you would agree that you interacted with sexually on an everyday basis when she was 15 years old.
You know, again, Mr. Edwards, I'd like to answer all your questions here today. My attorneys have asked me, advised me that I must assert my Sixth Amendment, 14th Amendment, and Fifth Amendment rights provided by the U.S. Constitution. And the fact that the current U.S. Attorney has described your law firm as a criminal enterprise is one of the largest frauds in Florida's history for fabricating sexual cases of a sexual nature against me and others. Unfortunately, though I'd like to answer those questions, if I do, I risk losing my attorney's counsel. Therefore, I must assert my right.
All right, Madam Court Reporter, I'm going to attach as an exhibit the Jane Doe number 102 versus Jeffrey Epstein complaint at some point in time. It doesn't have to be done now, but it's going to be Exhibit 1 as I'm going to go through some of the facts as alleged in the complaint and as will be testified by by the plaintiff.
Counsel, do you have an extra copy of that for me?
No.
May I look at it real quick?
No. Would you agree that you, and it has my notes on it.
No, I understood. I saw.
But the notes are in highlighter, so when we copy it, it's not going to show up, and you can have a copy of it.
Understood. That's fine. Just for the record, that is a current operative pleading, correct?
Correct.
What does that mean?
It means that there may have been some amendments to a complaint. I want to make sure that that is the operative complaint at issue that he's speaking from today.
Is it true that...
Can I go with the record second? What? May I ask you a question?
Sure. Can we take a break for a second?
Again?
He wants to speak with me for a second.
Going to go off the video record at 12:01 p.m. We're back on the video record at 12:02 p.m.
Is it true, Mr. Epstein, that you and Ghislaine Maxwell forced to have sex with you on a daily basis?
Form argumentative, harassing.
Unfortunately, at this time, though I'd really like to answer those questions, like I've done for most of your questions here today, Mr. Edwards, your firm was described as a criminal enterprise, a serious criminal enterprise by the current U.S. attorney. Part of that criminal enterprise was fabricating cases of a sexual nature against me and others in order to fleece unsuspecting investors out of millions of dollars. So though unfortunately at this time, no matter how I'd like to respond to your questions, I must assert my Sixth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, and 14th Amendment rights under the U.S. Constitution, or risk having my attorneys resign.
Isn't it true that was yours and Ghislaine Maxwell's sex slave from the time she was 15 through the time she escaped when she was 19?
Again, objection, argumentative, harassing.
Mr. Edwards, your firm has been described as as a criminal enterprise by the current U.S. attorney and part of the largest fraud in Florida's history. Part of that fraud was fabricating multiple cases against people like me and others of a sexual nature in order to fleece unsuspecting investors out of millions and millions of dollars. So though I'd like to answer that question, my attorneys have told me today I must assert my Sixth Amendment, 14th Amendment, and Fifth Amendment right.
Isn't it true that you and Ghislaine Maxwell celebrated her 16th birthday with her and had sex with her on that day?
Form, compound, confusing, argumentative, and harassing.
Mr. Edwards, I'd like to answer that question. My attorneys told me today that I have to, at least today, assert my Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, and 14th Amendment rights to the U.S. Constitution. Especially, my concern is that your firm has filed fraudulent lawsuits, fabricated lawsuits, and the U.S. attorney, the current U.S. attorney, has described your firm as a criminal enterprise whose main purpose was to generate money for the firm and its co-conspirators through the operation of various criminal activities, including mail fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering.
Are you saying that the complaint of against you, the allegations in that complaint, are false?
Form, misinterprets the witness's testimony.
Or are you saying it's true?
Same objection.
It's either true or false.
What I said, maybe I'll repeat myself, unfortunately. But the current U.S. attorney has described your law firm was involved in the filing of motions. I'm sorry. You want to tell me what it was then? What would you like to tell me the firm's involvement in this lawsuit? Since this will be here the rest of the day.
Answer the question.
Oh, you're fine. The U.S. attorney has described that firm as a criminal enterprise perpetrating one of the largest frauds in Florida's history against unsuspecting investors, fleecing them out of millions of dollars by creating, crafting, and fabricating fallacious sexual claims against people like me and others. So unfortunately, though I'd like to answer your questions, Mr. Edwards, my counsel has advised me that at least today I must assert my Sixth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, and 14th Amendment rights under the U.S. Constitution.
Isn't it true, sir, and I'm reading,
especially because your firm involved in this lawsuit has fabricated, widely reported, multiple cases of sexual harassment cases against individuals like me and others, perpetrating what the U.S. attorney called one of the largest frauds in Florida's history, fleecing people out of millions of dollars. So though I'd like to answer that question, today I have to assert those rights or risk losing my attorney's counsel.
Is it true that you forced as a 15-year-old girl to have sex with numerous friends of yours?
Are you kidding?
Reading from her lawsuit.
Oh, you're reading from her lawsuit. I'm sorry. Sorry, Mr. Evans. I'm going to have to, though I'd like to answer that question as well, as I answered most of your other questions here today, I would like to respond. My attorneys, however, have advised me I have to assert my Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, and 14th Amendment rights under the U.S. Constitution. especially as your firm has been accused by the U.S. Attorney as being a criminal enterprise and part of the largest fraud in Florida's history. Basically, I'm sorry if I read correctly, the operation of the enterprise through various criminal activities including mail fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering, fabricating sexual harassment cases against people like me and others.
By the way,
Yes.
didn't receive a round-trip ticket paid for by you to, and she ultimately did not get back on the plane but instead escaped to?
I'd like to answer that question, but today I'm going to have to assert my Sixth Amendment rights, my Fifth Amendment rights, and my 14th Amendment rights under the U.S. Constitution, especially since your firm has been described as perpetrating one of the largest frauds in Florida's history, fleecing investors out of millions of dollars, being described by the U.S. Attorney of South Florida as a criminal enterprise, engaged in various criminal activities including mail fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering.
Do you know a man named Jean-Luc Brunel?
Can you spell it?
He was at your house last week. Does that remind you?
Form, move to strike, speculation, argumentative, harassing. Is there a question on the table, Mr.
Yes, do you know him?
Could you spell his name for me, please?
I don't need to spell his name. You know who I'm talking about, Mr. Brunel.
I'm sorry, could you... Mr. what?
B-R-U-N-E-L.
I see. I would like to answer that question as well, but my attorneys have counseled me to that today. I'm going to have to assert my Sixth Amendment rights, my Fifth Amendment rights, and my 14th Amendment rights under the U.S. Constitution, or risk losing my right to effective representation.
What's the purpose for you asking me to spell his name? Are you acting like you don't know him?
Form, move to strike, argumentative, and irrelevant as worded. Mr. Edwards, you know that there are various standing orders, if not in this case, in various other cases, that specifically describe the protections of the Fifth Amendment. Federal courts have ordered that certain questions that you are asking shall not be answered, or Mr. Epstein would risk losing his Fifth Amendment right.
No, I understand that.
Under the United
spell people's names.
Wait a second. Under the United States Constitution. A lot of these questions here today that you're asking have already been ruled on by various courts that the Fifth Amendment protects any response thereto. So I would like it, I'm giving you some leeway here with regard to these argumentative questions. We've already, and I'm not obviously testifying for the witness, but we've already handled a lot of these issues in court, and we've already adjourned one deposition for being argumentative, and I think you understand what the court said there. So, you know, having said that, and I understand that you have a job to do, but having said that, I would like to caution you professionally that if you continue with the argumentative questions, I am going to have to terminate this deposition, and then we'll just...
Do what you have to do, Mr. Pike. I completely understand.
Okay. We're here today...
Mr. Brunel is a...
I'm sorry, just go ahead. We're here, I want the court to know that we're here today to allow you to ask your questions, but the harassing and argumentative tone is not going to be tolerated. So
there's a
just go ahead
video.
and proceed.
There's a video. We can show the court the tone. It's obviously not harassing. So,
That's fine.
Mr. Brunel is a longtime friend of yours, right?
I intend to respond to all relevant questions to this lawsuit. However, today, my attorneys have counseled me that I cannot provide answers to any questions that may be relevant to this lawsuit, and I must accept their advice or risk losing my Sixth Amendment right to effective representation.
You know him as somebody who has been caught engaging in sex with underage minors in the past. Is that correct?
Form.
You'll have to repeat the question, sorry.
You know Mr. Brunel as somebody who has been caught engaging in sex with minors in the past. Is that correct?
Form.
Sure. I intend to respond to all relevant questions regarding this lawsuit. However, at the present time, my attorneys have counseled me that I cannot provide answers to any questions relevant to this lawsuit, and I must accept their advice or risk losing my Sixth Amendment right to effective representation. As your firm has been described by the U.S. Attorney as a criminal enterprise and part of one of the largest frauds in Florida's history. It specifically said you've been fabricating, the law firm was fabricating multiple cases involving of a sexual nature in order to fleece unsuspecting investors out of millions of dollars, including mail fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. So unfortunately, though I'd like to answer all your questions here today, I must assert my 6th Amendment, 14th Amendment, and 5th Amendment right.
And you were involved in a modeling business with him called MC Squared, is that correct?
Again?
You were involved in a modeling agency
What do you
with
mean by-
Mr. Brunel
Sorry.
called MC Squared.
Involved means what? Sorry. What do you mean?
Well, you tell the jury your involvement with the modeling agency. You can clarify.
Form of
I'll let you do that.
I intend to respond to all relevant questions regarding this lawsuit. However, at the present time, my attorneys have counseled me that I cannot provide answers to any questions relevant to this lawsuit, and I must accept their advice or risk losing my 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment rights under the U.S. Constitution.
And when you were being criminally investigated and was in, is it true that you made a personal telephone call to her telling her not to come forward with any of the information she knew?
form.
Again, sorry,
When you were being, I'm putting a time frame on it, the time period where you were being criminally investigated.
what time frame is that?
In her complaint, it's not specific. But at some point, let's just make it whenever. At some point in time, did you place a telephone call to in Australia, warning her not to come forward with any information about you engaging in sex with her while she was a minor?
Form.
I intend to respond to all relevant questions regarding this lawsuit. However, at the present time, my attorneys have counseled me that I cannot provide answers to any questions relevant to this lawsuit, and I must accept their advice or risk losing my 6th Amendment right to effective representation.
With respect to underage females, isn't it true that you have made the statement, in quotes, the younger the better?
Form.
Again, as your firm has been described by the current U.S. Attorney as a criminal enterprise involved in mail fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and specifically crafting, fabricating multiple cases of a sexual nature against people like me and others in order to fleece many, many unsuspecting investors out of millions of dollars, I would like to answer your questions here today, Mr. Edwards. But unfortunately, my attorneys have counseled me that I must assert my 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment right, or they will resign.
Who are your current employees?
Form.
Again?
Who are your current employees? People who work for you that you pay.
I intend to respond to all relevant questions regarding this lawsuit. However, at the present time, my attorneys have counseled me that I cannot provide answers to any questions that may be relevant to this lawsuit or risk losing my 5th Amendment, 6th Amendment right to effective representation. Accordingly, therefore, I must assert my 5th Amendment, 6th Amendment, and 14th Amendment rights as provided by the U.S. Constitution.
Isn't it true that you pay your employees to bring you underage minor females for sex?
Form. Argumentative speculation. Harassment.
Mr. Edwards, your firm has been described by the current U.S. Attorney as a criminal enterprise. A criminal enterprise. Part of the largest fraud in South Florida's history. Part of that fraud was fabricating fictitious cases against against people like me of a sexual nature in order to fleece unsuspecting investors out of millions of dollars. Unfortunately, at this time, though I'd like to answer every one of your questions, my attorneys advise me that I must assert my 6th Amendment, 14th Amendment, and 5th Amendment rights or risk losing them as my attorneys.
Isn't it true when underage females were brought to you
you would engage in sex with them and pay them.
Form, argumentative, harassing.
Are you shaking your head to say no?
Excuse me?
Are you shaking your head to say no? I don't know how to interpret the answer.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was shaking my head.
Okay.
One second.
I thought he was actually answering a question.
Move to strike. The rules are well known to every lawyer who practices in the state of Florida, that it's clear that a nod of the head or a shake of the head is not understood by the record. So therefore, Mr. Epstein clearly was not responding to one of your questions, and you know that, Mr. Edwards.
This is on video, Mike.
Nonetheless, you know the rules. Nonetheless, if we have a question on the table, would you please repeat it so I can recall it and so Mr. Epstein can endeavor to answer it?
Sure, and if it was only a court reporter, I would agree, but the jury's going to see a video, and everybody knows commonly, if somebody shakes their head, they're saying no. If that was the answer, I wanted to give them a chance to elaborate on it. That's it. Isn't it true that when underage females would come to your house, you would engage in sexual activity with them and then pay them?
Same projections.
Unfortunately, I'd like to answer that question today, but my attorneys have counseled me that I must assert my Sixth Amendment right, my Fifth Amendment right, and my 14th Amendment right under the U.S. Constitution. The fact that your firm has been described as a criminal enterprise and part of one of the largest frauds in South Florida's history, part of that fraud has been described as fabricating cases of a sexual nature against me and others in order to fleece unsuspecting investors out of millions of dollars. I would like to answer that question, Mr. Edwards. But however, today, I must assert my 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment right.
In addition to paying these underage females for sexual activity, you also paid them to bring their underage friends to you to also engage in sexual activity with.
Form.
Is that correct?
I intend to respond to all relevant questions regarding this lawsuit. However, at the present time, my attorneys have counseled me that I may not. And I must assert, they have advised me I must assert my 6th Amendment right, my 5th Amendment right, and my 14th Amendment rights under the U.S. Constitution.
You would pay underage females $200 to $300 for engaging in sexual activity with you or for procuring another underage female to engage in sexual activity with. Is that correct?
Form. Move to strike. Assumes facts not in evidence and calls for a legal conclusion and is as well argumentative.
I intend to respond to all relevant questions regarding this lawsuit. However, at the present time, my attorneys have counseled me that I cannot provide answers to any questions that may be relevant to this lawsuit, and I must accept their advice or risk losing my Sixth Amendment right to effective representation. Accordingly, therefore, I must assert my constitutional rights as guaranteed by the 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution.
Would you agree that your scheme was devised to coerce these underage minors to bring you as many other underage minors as were available for you to engage in sexual activity with?
Form.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. Would you agree that your scheme was devised to coerce underage girls into bringing as many other underage girls to you as were available for sexual purposes?
Form.
Did you say for sexual purposes?
Yes, for sexual purposes.
I'm not surprised. Sorry. Since your firm was described as perpetrating one of the largest frauds in Florida's history by crafting fabricated sexual harassment cases against people like me and others in order to fleece unsuspecting investors out of millions of dollars, I would like to answer that question. However, today, my attorneys have advised me I must assert my Sixth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, and 14th Amendment right under the U.S. Constitution, and if I don't do so, I risk losing effective representation.
Utilizing this method of using underage minors to bring you other underage minors, you were able
to engage in sex with hundreds of underage minor females. Is that true?
Form, argumentative, harassing, calls for speculation.
Since, Mr. Edwards, your firm has been described as a criminal enterprise by the U.S. Attorney, and I risk having
An answer. Say it again.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Could you repeat it?
Sure. With this method of
This
using
method being what? Sorry?
your method of using underage minors to bring you other underage minors for sex, isn't it true that that method resulted in you engaging in sexual activity with underage minors on an everyday basis?
Same objections.
Your firm has been described by the current U.S. Attorney as a criminal enterprise.
To keep track of all of these underage minors, you stored their names and telephone numbers in your home computer, isn't that correct?
Form, argumentative, speculation.
Again? Sorry.
Are you going to answer the question or just read? If you are going to answer the question,
me?
of course, I'll keep reading it as many times.
Wait 1 second. The witness is attempting to answer your question. He asked you to repeat the question.
He is?
He asked you to repeat the question.
And I don't mind going through that, Mike, because I do want answers. But if I'm going to repeat the question multiple times and still get the same answer, we're just wasting time. I'm just trying to stop us from wasting time repeating questions if I'm getting the same non-responsive answer.
I understand your intention here.
Yeah.
However, these questions are similar in nature, if not identical, to various questions that you've asked in other cases. So you coming here today is of no surprise that Mr. Epstein is required to invoke his 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment rights underneath the United States Constitution.
I understand that.
If you came here today thinking that you were going to pull a rabbit out of the hat and get, waive Mr. Epstein was going to waive his 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment rights to the United States Constitution, at least not today. That will not be occurring.
Isn't it true that to keep track of the names and phone numbers of these underage minor females you interacted with sexually, you stored those names and phone numbers in your home computer?
Thank you. And I've heard the question now. So it doesn't surprise, again, I've now heard your question, and the fact that your firm has been described against me, that I must assert my 6th Amendment, resign.
Do you know
I intend to respond to all relevant
minor females and make them appointments to be at your house? Minor females and scheduling them appointments to be at your house.
and so at this moment,
Move to strike my question? On what basis?
Do I have to state a basis? Usually I'm just required to state form.
Done more than
If
that today.
I went on a diatribe of explaining, what's confusing, compound, irrelevant, then you would blame me for testifying for the witness. So I just moved to strike the question.
No.
Move to strike.
I intend to respond. Cannot
To have sex with inside your home while you watched masturbating.
Same objections.
Okay.
you have to repeat the question. It's unclear.
Isn't it true that you have ordered several underage minor females to have sex with in your home while you watched masturbating?
Objections.
The current U.S. Attorney has described your firm, Mr. Edwards, as a criminal enterprise involved in
Objection. Argument.
Well, when a 14 or 15-year-old would be led into your bedroom, you would appear from the shower first, usually naked. Is that correct?
Objection. Argumentative. Assumes facts not in evidence. And harassing.
I intend to respond to all relevant questions regarding this lawsuit. However, today, my attorneys have advised me that I cannot provide answers to any.
Don't worry about it. Underage minor female to disrobe. Isn't that true?
Same objections. Form.
My Jeffrey's firm is why my fifth.
Insert your fingers into her vagina.
Rights under the U.S. Constitution.
You would then rub the underage minor female's vagina and or insert your fingers into her vagina. Is that correct?
Form.
I intend to respond to all relevant questions regarding this lawsuit. Unfortunately, today, my attorneys have advised me I cannot and must assert my rights under the U.S. Constitution under the Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, and 14th Amendments of the U.S. Constitution, especially since your firms and others.
And with many of these underage minors, you would use vibrators on them. Is that correct?
Form.
I would like to respond to that question, as I'd like to respond to all your other questions today. However, my attorneys have counseled me, excuse me, that I must assert my Sixth Amendment rights, my Fifth Amendment rights, and my 14th Amendment rights under
In June of 2008, you pled guilty to a couple felonies, right?
Form. Vague and confusing.
Again,
In June of 2008, you pled guilty to 2 felonies. Is that correct?
Same objection.
Yes.
And what were those felonies that you pled guilty to?
Solicitation of prostitutes. Not underage prostitutes, but simply prostitutes. Solicitation of prostitutes, and 1 count of procuring a minor for underage sex.
And you've taken the fifth as to questions related to many of these underage minors, but the underage minors that were the victims in the cases where you pled guilty were... was that one of them?
Form mischaracterizes the witness's testimony, causes for a legal conclusion.
Again?
What was the name of any of the underage minors that were the subject of the criminal charges to which you pled guilty?
I don't know.
So tell me about those charges. What was the allegations of those charges?
Form.
Solicitation of prostitution.
Okay.
Not underage prostitution, prostitution.
Were the victims or the prostitutes, as you would say, were they minors?
Form.
I pled guilty to solicitation of prostitution.
Okay, so tell me what those cases were about. What happened?
I
Form
have
again.
no more. I can't tell you any more than that.
You don't know what you pled guilty to?
I just
I'm
told you.
going to object to
Sorry.
form. That's asked and answered.
Do you know what you pled guilty to? The facts.
Solicitation of prostitution.
I understand that's the charge. What were the underlying facts?
Sorry.
What did you do? Did you pull up in a car, talk to the person? Did they come over to your house? How did you get them? Those kind of things. Tell the jury what were the underlying facts about the charge that you pled guilty to.
Form. Move to strike.
I don't know.
You don't know what you pled guilty to.
I pled guilty to solicitation of prostitution. Not underage prostitution, but prostitution.
Okay. My understanding from reading the court file is that one of those females was. Do you know who that is?
I intend to respond to all relevant questions to this lawsuit. However, at the present time, my attorneys have counseled me that I cannot provide answers to any of these questions today. So accordingly, I must assert my constitutional rights under the 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution.
You're aware that is somebody that alleges she was at your house on more than 100 occasions. Is that true?
14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution.
You're aware that is somebody that alleges she was at your house on more than 100 occasions. Is that true?
Form.
Could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Are you aware that is a female that alleges that when she was underage, she was at your house on more than 100 occasions?
Form. Predicate.
I intend to respond to all relevant questions to this lawsuit, Mr. Edwards. However, today, my attorneys have counseled me that I must respond by invoking my Fifth Amendment right, my Sixth Amendment right, and my 14th Amendment rights under the U.S. Constitution, unless or risk losing them as my attorneys. Excuse me. So therefore, I must assert those rights.
And you understand that her complaint was that Epstein turned onto her stomach on the massage bed and inserted his penis into her vagina. Stated Epstein began to pump his penis in her vagina and she became upset over this. She said her head was being held against the bed forcibly as he continued to pump inside her while she screamed no. Are you aware of those allegations?
Form. Predicate.
I'm sorry, did you say there was a complaint?
It's in the incident report that led to a charging document that led to a charge that you have pled guilty to. Are you aware of that information coming from?
I'm sorry, Mr. Edwards. What are you reading from?
The 87-page Palm Beach Police Department incident report where there are numerous underage females describing their interaction with Mr. Epstein at his house. I'm reading specifically from page 41 related to who was one of the victims pled guilty to.
Is that the same document that you're seeking production of in this same exact case?
I don't know what you're talking about. This is something from the state attorney's file.
Okay. Sorry, what's the question?
Are you aware of that allegation? What I just read to you.
I'd like to answer that question, but how?
Already pled guilty to related to. So I'd like you to just explain to the jury, in your words, or your version of the story, what was your interaction with at your house when she was a minor?
Object to form, as worded, could disclose attorney-client communications.
I'd like to answer each one of your questions.
Your penis into her vagina.
Objection, relevance, argumentative, compound, harassment.
Question was,
this was who?
Question was, are you aware?
Alexander Paul. The current U.S. Attorney, since he's described your firm, money laundering. I'm afraid today, though I'd like to answer each one of your questions, my attorneys have counseled me that I must not, and must assert my Sixth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, and 14th Amendment rights under the U.S. Constitution. And though I believe you know I'd like to answer those questions, I must assert those rights or risk losing my attorney's representation.
Do you know?
Spell it for me, please.
I don't know how to spell her name, but do you know? I don't know that she ever would have spelled her name for you.
Form, name is strike.
I intend to respond to all relevant questions regarding and
any of the. You asked to help to refresh your recollection. That's.
I'd like to answer that question, but today, according to my attorneys, I must assert.
You asked me to spell his name. That's somebody that your attorneys took her deposition about a year and a half ago. Does that help to refresh your recollection? That's.
I'd like to answer that question.
Your house that you pled guilty to the solicitation of.
And I'd like to ask you if you remember her.
Form, confusing, compound.
I don't know her first name. It's initials, last name.
Same objection.
I intend to respond to all relevant.
Results in a charge as
Is this some order? Sorry.
Yes, there is.
I'm sorry.
We're stopping again.
No, can I get some water? You don't have to stop. Mr. Jaffe, could you pass some water?
Is there water?
There is no water.
No water. Okay.
Oh, sorry. I'll go.
With each conviction, charge, or with each charge that leads to a conviction, there are facts and circumstances that lead up to that plea of guilty. What are the facts and circumstances that led to you pleading guilty to the two felonies that you described?
Form, overbroad, compound, confusing, calls for illegal conclusion.
Assert my constitutional assurance.
Talking about the cases where you've already pled guilty, you can't be charged again. What were the facts and circumstances that led up to you pleading guilty to these felonies?
I've answered the question, I think, but
Same objection, asked and answered.
Okay. And just so the jury understands, these three females that were the subject of the guilty pleas in state court were procured by your method of having underage minor females locate other underage minor females and bring them to your house. Isn't that correct?
Objection, argumentative, compound, harassing, assumes facts not in evidence.
you'll have
And
to
I move
repeat.
to strike.
I have to repeat the question.
Okay. Are all people that were, at the time you engaged in sexual activity with them, were underage and were brought by other underage minor females? Is that true?
Same objections incorporated. As well as the motion to strike.
I don't understand. I'm sorry.
Asked and answered. Wait.
Isn't it true that you used underage minor females to bring other underage minor females to your house for sex?
Asked and answered. Way earlier on.
Oh, well, he doesn't understand the question, so I'm going through the progression.
Not a problem.
But it is asked and answered.
As your firm, Mr. Edwards and Mr. Jaffe, has been described by the U.S.
Each house, is that correct?
Form.
Again, sorry.
Well, if you were soliciting prostitutes, it wasn't out on the street, it wasn't in a hotel. These were girls that you solicited to be prostitutes at your house in Palm Beach, correct?
Objection, relevance, argumentative. Calls for speculation as worded and assumes facts not in evidence.
Though I'd like to answer that question, my attorneys today have advised me I cannot answer it today. Otherwise, I
Plead guilty to these felony offenses.
Palm Beach County.
So these were crimes that occurred here in Palm Beach County.
Form.
Is that correct?
I pled guilty in Palm Beach County.
Isn't it true that you kept a calendar or schedule? Okay, change.
رادیو مناهج، راه نوین دانایی. مناهج.ir